Welcome to Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation. Today, my guest, Sharon Gillenwater. Hello, Sharon.
Hello, Dennis. How are you?
It's a pleasure to see you. I got a chance to, my co-producer, Renee Jaworski, connected me to you, and she said, you have to meet this person because she and I are both very, very much involved in the success of women and empowering women in tech and government and leadership because I just don't see, we men have taken it about as far as we can by ourselves. We've reached that point where zero sum no longer works. This hierarchical, we've got to get into the synergy. We've got to get into all the things that women bring to the table so that we can have a higher population. So anyway, that was one of the reasons why I met you. And when you were working in tech and working your startup and doing, you were very much of an outlier as far as gender was concerned, right? Can you talk a little bit about it, negotiating that?
Yeah, I got I'm kind of a late bloomer. I got my start in tech and in startups when I was 30. So, I kind of fooled around in my 20s trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Um, when I got into tech, yeah, I mean, it was mainly male founders that you come across and funders, and they all fund each other and they're not interested in funding people like me. Although I did raise venture capital at an earlier startup, and that did not end well because you know, figuratively got in bed with some really unscrupulous people. So I learned
Yes.
my, so when I did my second startup, it was a conscious choice to not try to raise money. Um, that said, there were several inflection points in the business where I thought, well, it'd be really helpful to have, $500,000 to get to the next level. So, along with my male business partner, we made a few attempts to raise, but just didn't um, saw that they weren't interested in people like us. They weren't interested, even though we had some of the biggest tech companies in the world as our raving fans and customers. They didn't care because they didn't see an opportunity for our business to become a unicorn, to scale massively. Um, and so I think what I saw is a lot of women and a lot of people build successful small and medium-sized businesses that can create life-changing wealth. But because it's not, an order of magnitude that the VCs expect, there's no room for them in that world.
Yes.
And so I think, a message to women and men as well. I mean, I'm very supportive of focusing on women in business, but I'm not anti-man, right? I had many amazing male collaborators and mentors, so I just want to emphasize that. They're
Oh,
all
it's
great.
it's an and gate, not an or gate. We're talking about in addition to,
Yes.
we're talking about a population, a mental population of thought rather
Yeah.
than an exclusion of it, right?
Yes, and even under the best of circumstances with the best supporters and collaborators, I mean, you you do have to work around and navigate the classic where you come up with an idea and then like 6 months later someone's like, why don't we do this, when it was kind of minimized when you brought it up. So there's always that kind of thing that I see.
Yeah, I have.
And I mean, it's interesting to see kind of the generational shifts, because younger women, maybe Gen Z women or even millennial women, are going to call that out as it's happening. my generation, I'm on the tail. No, I'm among the first of Gen X. I think I'm the last year of or the first year of Gen X. We navigated it more like our mothers. My mother was in business, and you just
She
go
was in
around.
computers, right? I mean, she was a coder, and who codes matters, right?
Yeah, because back when she started, computer work was considered clerical work. So it was women's work when it started, but once it became very lucrative, it was taken over by men. So, people of her generation and my generation to a certain degree, we just kind of kept our mouths shut and um, kept winning, right? um, because
Exactly. Exactly.
we were more pragmatic. We needed those men to support us and need us in a way. So there were battles that we weren't really willing to fight because it would get in the way of our goals, right? Um, and and there's a similar dynamic at play, I think, now with younger women that get frustrated when they hear our stories. Are like, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you stand up? And why didn't you? It's like, I needed those people to come along. So I was being practical, right? Um, so, and I think what we're seeing is there's a backlash, um, especially in tech with men, against things like DEI and people calling them out for not having enough women on their boards or in leadership because the titans have become very antagonistic. They don't care. They're hostile. They're not even trying to look like they care.
Let me
Yeah,
ask a question here. When you and I both know that, how would you go against talent? I mean, imagine, like, I was born in 1948, and I looked at the 1948 Detroit Pistons basketball team, all white guys. How would that team fare against the basketball teams of today? It's a matter of talent. And there is so much talent to be brought onto the table that I feel like that it is very short-sighted of people. Mark Cuban brings up this point.
yeah.
We're talking about talent. How do you make sure you're bringing the best talent to the table? And anyway, so that was what I wanted to interrupt you with, and so please continue.
Well, it's not only bringing the best talent to the table, because when I had my company, we couldn't afford to go out and recruit the best talent. And actually, I don't even think that would be the best choice for us because sometimes the best talent is used to unlimited resources. And we didn't have that, right? So, what we focused on instead was developing talent. So finding the kids just out of school who went to a tier 2 or tier 3 school and just finding the diamonds there. Kids who are incredibly smart but don't even know it because they're
Beautiful.
not entitled and they haven't grown up thinking they're, the best and the smartest, but they have incredible talent, raw talent that you can then develop and not only develop their skills, but their confidence and their leadership abilities. That's what we did really well. And that was the most rewarding thing about running my company, which was unexpected because I don't really, frankly, consider myself much of a people person. But I loved our team and I just was inspired by watching, especially someone right out of school, just develop that confidence and skill and quickly within, a couple of years become a leader at our company. I was just on LinkedIn, I miss my team because, I was out of the company pretty much 3 weeks after we sold it. And so I'm looking at, oh, who's gotten promoted? You know, I was on LinkedIn today, kind of checking them out and noticing that some of the folks that I'd hired right before we sold the company are now in a leadership role in the company. So that's very rewarding. And these are people who came in, you know, maybe not convinced that they had a place, you know, and so that's really special to me. And that's how you change the world, one person at a time, you know. The people, I have nothing against, you know, the people who went to Ivy League and are the best and the best and the brightest. I put that in quotes because who really knows? They've had the best, you know, they've had a lot of
Exactly
advantages.
it.
Um,
Exactly.
but you know, what can we do to bring everybody else up who didn't have those advantages and didn't have an Ivy League education? And this really resonates with me because I come from a working class background. It was the first in my family to go to college. And yeah, I have a chip on my shoulder about it, you know, because when you're in tech and you go to try to raise money or you go to a networking event or and it's all these kind of Ivy League guys mostly, um, it's intimidating and you know you're dismissed and discounted and um, so it's inspiring to me to do something to help bring those kids along. It could be, you know, I was one of them at one point.
But that's what I'm talking about talent, about growing the talent, about what because the talent is out there. It may need to be nurtured, it may need to be grown, and you're working on that, but that's the way you did it.
That's the way I did it. And I think that this is tapping into something that the next generations want as well, because even though we hear that Gen Z does not want to come into the office, um, they also say that they are looking for mentorship and, you know, training and help in their careers. They want that. And so, you know, these videos that I see sometimes online, especially in the tech, these tech layoffs of young people, probably the, you know, first or second job in their career, it's devastating because the hit to the confidence, these are, it's a fragile period when you're first starting your career. And I wish that every young person had someone like me or someone like the mentors I had when I was coming up to just give them that first, you know, mentorship experience where they can acquire a baseline level of confidence and skill that will make them more resilient in their career. But, you know, in tech, you'll hear, for example, well, just hire 30 salespeople, and in 3 months, you'll get rid of half of them. And in another 3 months, you'll get rid of another half, and then you'll end up with, you know, 7 good ones. That's just going in saying people are disposable. And you're just going to throw these people into the pot and they sink or swim. And I don't think I could sleep at night if I operated that way. But that's the way a lot of companies, particularly in tech, operate. It's like, well, what about if you hired, you know, half as many people and invested that money in getting them where they need to be, particularly in sales, because it can take 9 months to make your first sale. I was in sales, it took me 9 months. I spent 6 months convinced I was going to get fired. But once I made that first sale, there was no stopping me. So I think the way that the conventional wisdom around running tech startups in particular is just all wrong. You know, I put out a video last week because we have this proposed California bill, I think it's called 2751, where it's the right to disconnect. And it's a bill that it's something they've passed in Italy and France and a number of countries. But basically, what it does is it prevents bosses from retaliating against employees that refuse to respond to messages on the weekends or after 5. And there are exceptions for salaried employees who might be doing engineering sprints to build up to a product launch. So there are exceptions to protect those types of situations. But the tech bros here in the Bay Area went nuts, hysterical. I mean, they call women emotional. One guy said, they're going to legislate us into poverty. So I made this video kind of laughing at them because it's just absurd, and um, I will get a little political here. I thought, wow, wait till they hear what they're trying to do to women with their female engineers, if they get pregnant and they're forced to give birth to that baby, they're going to need some time off, like at least a week.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
premiums, those insurance premiums are probably going to go up. So it makes me puzzled that they would see the right to disconnect as something that could, devastate startups throughout California, while, you know, a threat to women's bodily autonomy, there's not a peep out of them about that.
Exactly. And they have people in Texas or in Louisiana who have children who a teenager, you have a teenage girl and you've moved to Texas. I don't understand why there is not more why that there is not more outcry on this.
Well, I think it's because two things. If you're privileged and have money, you can get around those things. And secondly, we're in this climate where people don't really pay attention or care until it happens to them personally. Um,
Thank you.
I don't really understand, but that's where we are. I mean, I've been beating this drum for more than a decade, and now people are just finally starting to wake up. And I think it's because it's happening to their friends, their neighbors, their daughters, people they know. And so it's unfortunate that it had to get to this point, but that's where we are. And so I think, there's a zeitgeist around, um, women, there need to be more women in leadership roles in government, business, um, everywhere.
Everywhere. So what's exciting you currently? Here we are in April of 2024. What is exciting you and driving you in the way, and does that drive continue? Does that drive that you have evolved?
I think it becomes more clear the more conversations I have with people. Believe it or not, when I left my company a little more than 2 years ago, I spent about 6 months, kind of goofing off and figured out I wanted something to do that was work, not necessarily running a startup again, but doing something. But I didn't really know what I had to offer. I had been running this company. I had run a consulting business. And so I was a real generalist. Like I couldn't come in and create someone's go-to-market strategy, for example, or overhaul their marketing funnel. Or I'm a generalist and I'm a manager. So I didn't really know what my expertise was or if it mattered or if it would be useful to anybody. But I just started having more and more conversations with entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, but not exclusively women, and realized, they're taking copious notes here. This must be useful. I must be conveying something that's helpful. And what I realized is there are a lot of people out there running businesses successfully, and a lot of them started like I did, where they were working in a field and they saw a problem that needed to be solved, and so they created a solution, and then after a while they have a whole business and it's doing very, very well. That's very different from someone who comes out of Harvard or Stanford studying entrepreneurship and finance and gets kind of funneled into the Silicon Valley pipeline and starts, working at a unicorn, right? It's very different. And the former, of which I am one, you just work in a field and you start something. We are not trained formally in, deal making, fundraising, how to, find partners and vendors and all those things. We kind of have to make it up as we go along. So that's what I learned, all of those things. One of the first videos I ever made was, what is an M&A banker and when do you need one? Now, the guys in Silicon Valley, they'd be like, that's so simple. Like, who doesn't know that? Well, I didn't know. When I got ready to sell my company, I didn't know, and I had to figure it out. And now I probably won't need to do that again for myself, but I can tell everybody else, how to do it. And the jargon, doing it without using jargon is important because jargon excludes people. It makes them feel stupid. It makes them afraid to ask questions. So I just try to break it down in simple terms that are very accessible for people. And so that's my mission, is to really make entrepreneurship more accessible to everyone and to help people build the confidence that they can do it. Because, I spent years running my business where I was in almost a nonstop panic and imposter kind of spiral, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And fortunately, what really helped me were my male mentors, who had done this before. And I had such a level of comfort with them that I felt like I could ask any question and they wouldn't think I was stupid. Or if they did, I didn't really care. And so now I'm trying to be the female role model that can help provide this information and where people can feel comfortable asking any question. There's no question too simple.
That's wonderful. What a gift of giving back, of taking your lessons and moving them along and giving them back. On this particular episode, is there anything we haven't talked about that is on your mind or on your heart that you'd like to make sure that we get on this particular show, Sharon?
Yeah, I mean, there's this perception that when you start a company, particularly in tech, that you need to raise venture capital. I got stuck in that mindset myself, and I see so many entrepreneurs get stuck in that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need some capital to get started, but there are two ways you can get around it that I highly recommend. The first way is, if you're the kind of entrepreneur who started like me, you're working in a field, you see a problem, you start to tinker on the side, and what about this? And you start to try to test it and validate it. I would hold on to my day job as long as possible. It's not easy. You're working nights and weekends, and but it's a way to stay in your field while you're creating something new for that audience. So you can continue to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in that industry. You can bring your solution to people in the industry if you're still working in it, and test and ask questions. And then the second thing you can do is just find angels, friends and family, to give you that little bit of capital that you need. And if you're in a bootstrapper mindset where you need to make that money last as long as possible, you'll do it. Because I think, if you have a bunch of money, if you're funded by VCs, you invest too early in things you don't need yet. You don't need a CFO when you're a 3-person company. You don't need a CTO. non-technical founders have more, the barriers to entry are lower for non-technical founders than ever because there are these low code, no code products out there that you can build a lot while still being non-technical just to test and iterate. And then what happened with us is, we struggled for a while, but after a while, your business starts throwing off some cash. And we got to that next inflection point where, wow, it would be really nice to have an extra 500 grand to rebuild our platform and add on some more software. But the cost was going to be too high. So we just, did it ourselves. We just waited a little longer until we had the cash and we did it ourselves. And once you get to that point, it's like, why would I give up any equity? So when I sold my company, I owned 57% of it. My partner owned like another 28% of it. We preserved our equity. And if you had asked us, in the first 3 years, we would have said, oh, this isn't worth it. But it sure was worth it in the end. And what I've since learned, and this is important information, because, I'd been an entrepreneur for 20 years and really didn't realize this. When you keep fundraising, your equity gets so whittled down that even if you sell for, 10 times as much as my company sold for, you might walk away with less money than I did. And along the way, it's a lot less pleasant of a journey potentially because you have investors watching over you and on your board, and they don't necessarily understand your business. And so they're going to try to steer you off to do something that's not what is the right thing for your business, such as hire 30 salespeople and then fire half of them in 3 months, right? So own your journey as much as you can. And don't just go down that venture capital path because A, you might not be successful. And then where are you? B, they're going to whittle your equity down to nothing and it's going to be a lot less pleasant. You can't really run your company the way that you want to run it. And C, there are viable alternatives such as friends, family, angels, and just bootstrapping or some combination of the two.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to be able to learn about you and to be able to see. I love the idea because we have these unicorns that we talk about, but to me, it's like working actors. Not everyone is going to be a megastar, Julia Roberts, this guy, but there is a whole realm of working actors. And why isn't there a whole realm of working tech that makes money, that is enough and supports a group like what you did, and it doesn't have to be that unicorn or that big budget blockbuster in entertainment that people are looking for. I love the idea of there being this place where we can succeed and support our families and have our health care and do the things that we can while we're developing our passions and the work we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you Google female entrepreneurs, which I've done many times, you hear about Oprah and Beyonce and Sarah Blakely, who's, invented Spanx. But where you don't have to get to that level. And if you set the bar at that level, people are going to quit before they even start. And that's why I would love to hear more people like me sharing their stories, particularly more women, because there are women out there who will look at us and say, well, I could do that. I don't have to be a multi-billionaire, but I could make 5 million or 8 million. That's life changing.
And we have. Well, anyway, thank you. I look forward to another opportunity to be able to meet you along this journey to see what you're learning and learning about yourself. Thank you for today, Sharon.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for watching Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation. All the links to Sharon Gillenwater and all of her work will be on the console. So check her out, check out the TikTok, check out the website, and we will see everybody next time.